Hello, this is Eric. Today is April the 5th, 2023. And in this video, we'll be talking about the João Goulart government. Well, if you watched our previous video, you will recall that President Jânio Quadros, believing that he would be embraced by the people, among way too much political pressure, decided to resign because he really thought that the people would support him, but that's not what happened. He resigned, and actually people appreciated that attitude, right? Because they were tired of Jânio Quadros and inflation. And now, in a normal situation, his vice president would assume as president. And the vice president in this case was João Goulart. João Goulart had initiated his political life as, he initiated his political life as Minister of Labor, Industry, and Commerce during the second government of Getúlio Vargas. Then he entered, the JK government as vice president, and again he was vice president during the Jânio Quadros government. But when everyone looked for João Goulart, once Jânio Quadros resigned, where was João Goulart? He was in China. That was a really, really complicated situation. Actually, that was a standoff. Because, as I said, the normal thing here would be João Goulart becoming president in the place of Jânio Quadros. But we are in the Cold War days. And João Goulart was in China, a communist country. So everybody was afraid of what João Goulart could do once he became president. This is João Goulart's picture, right? And, so we had the armed forces and the UDN party opposing Jango's inauguration. Jango was the way that the people nicknamed João Goulart, right? So UDN, the armed forces, and some wings of the Catholic Church opposed the inauguration of Jango in power. So then we had a whole legality campaign undertaken by Jango's brother-in-law, Leonel Brizola, in the south, right? And it was decided after this struggle that Jango would assume as president under a parliamentarian regime. So that was a constitutional amendment number 4 of 1961. So he would become president, but under the parliamentarism, right? And thus he would have limited powers. But Jango's party was very influential, and 2 years later, they managed to establish a plebiscite in 1963, right? And after this plebiscite, presidentialism was once again established in the country, right? Here you have, a newspaper headline at the time, and it says, on January the 6th, say no, vote correctly. And here you have, do you approve the additional act that instituted parliamentarism? And then you have here, no, check it in the checkbox, right? Well, so it was possible to see that there was way too much pressure for the return of presidentialism, right? And thus, Jango assumed as president in 1963. However, the country was going through a really delicate economic situation. Inflation during this year of the Jango government peaked 50.8% per year, right? That was really stratospheric, and the country was really, in this difficult process of economic growth. It had registered 1.5% in 1963. So, considering all the situation, let's remember once again that Jango was the Getúlio Vargas Minister of Labor, Industry, and Commerce. So he was pretty much into the idea of basis reform. And that ended up being his ultimate problem, as we're going to see shortly. Okay, so he came up with a triennial plan. And what was this triennial plan about? It was about cutting public spending, right? Cutting import subsidies, and increasing taxes for the rich. Yes, because the rich had a really, really nice life here in Brazil, an easy life, I would say. They paid small taxes while the population paid most of the taxes. And also, Jango was in favor of an agrarian reform. The agrarian issue had never been resolved in Brazil since the times of the hereditary captaincies. Yeah, since Portugal was the metropolis here, right? So it was more than time for Brazil to sort out this agrarian situation. But that decision really didn't please the landowners, didn't please the entrepreneurs, the bourgeoisie of the country. So as a result, opposition against the João Goulart government increased by the conservative sectors, right? And that triennial plan, even after a famous speech in Rio de Janeiro, was a total failure, right? Well, and as I said, his opposition grew more and more by landowners, by entrepreneurs, by the bourgeoisie, by the church. Why? Because more and more, because of his talks of basis reforms, he was seen by the church as a communist. Let's recall once again that these are the Cold War days. So he was more and more seen as a communist, right? And so the military that really wanted, to return to power, they saw a great opportunity there. And they were triggered by the church, by the bourgeoisie, by the landowners, and also by the middle class, right? In the middle of all this alienation and ignorance, right? Because he was accused of being a communist just because he was sent by Jânio Quadros to China. He was a vice president, so he was supposed to obey the president, right? So that's the reason why he was found in China before becoming the president. But he really, according to the people that worked with Jango, he was not a communist, and he was just in favor of these basis reforms that were more than necessary in such a difficult country like Brazil. So after so much opposition, there was the Family March with God for Freedom on March 19th and April 2nd in Rio de Janeiro. Actually, on April 2nd in Rio de Janeiro, that was no longer a family march against João Goulart, but that was used in a way to commemorate the military victory against João Goulart, right? And these were marches organized by the Catholic Ladies Association and by entrepreneurs and by people linked even to the American government that, as I had told you in the beginning, was really interested in protecting South America against the communist threat, right? So we are now going to watch this video that will synthesize all of that concerning the Family March, okay? So let's watch it now. March 19th, 1964. Thousands of people are on the streets of São Paulo in a parade to protest against the basis reforms proposed by the João Goulart government that, according to the opposition and members of the Catholic Church, would transform Brazil into a communist and atheistic country. You have to choose between the left dictatorship, the atheistic communism, or the right-wing dictatorship that will persecute you. We are here with people that are on the side of the people, that are highlighted in the political world in Brazil, that came to bring their solidarity to the people, that is here flooding in this place. The Family March with God for Freedom was called through the newspapers by religious associations, civic and feminist associations that are anti-communist, and political parties opposing the government. The more than 100 civil entities involved were coordinated by the Female Civic Union, founded in 1962 by wives of entrepreneurs and militaries in São Paulo, and also by the Campaign of Women for Democracy, founded in Rio de Janeiro by Catholic fathers and wives of Rio de Janeiro entrepreneurs. The organization of the entities is supported financially by the Institute of Researches and Social Studies, IPES, an entity that was financed by São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro entrepreneurs and that also received money from the USA, and that was presided by General Golbery Couto Silva. With information from IPES, General Golbery created the National Information System, the SNI, that he himself presided from 1964 and 1967. The organization of the march was supported by the governor of São Paulo, Ademar de Barros, that didn't attend it, but sent his wife as representative. Historians attribute the Family March with God for Freedom as the legitimization of the people for the military coup that would take place in 1964. In the parade, signs against the atheistic communism demanded democracy, freedom, and a Christian government. After circulating around the city, the march reached the Sé Cathedral, where there was a platform. The newspapers openly supported the mobilization against the government and said that the public was around 500,000 people. According to the headlines, there was an agglomeration never seen in São Paulo. The platform just opposite the cathedral was crowded. There you could see fathers, deputies from opposition parties such as PSD and PST, the First Lady of the state, Leonor Mendes de Barros, Governor of Guanabara, Carlos Lacerda, and the President of the National Congress, Senator Auro de Moura Andrade. All of them made speeches against President João Goulart and his brother-in-law, Federal Deputy Leonel Brizola. They said that both wanted to deploy a communist dictatorship in Brazil, and against this, they asked the intervention of the armed forces. The march in the São Paulo capital inspired others along the countryside of the state, but when they were undertaken, the military were already in power. These were commemoration marches such as in Rio de Janeiro, the gathered public, calculated by the newspapers in around 1,000 people, cheering the victory of democracy against communism thanks to the action of the military. And after that, there would be a 21-year dictatorship in Brazil. Please allow me to make a correction here. In the second march in Rio de Janeiro, the newspaper claimed that there were around 1 million people, not 1,000 people in the march, right? But anyway, now that the correction is made, Well, after that, basically, President João Goulart had two options: gathering those who were in favor of him, gathering those who were in favor of having him as president and fighting against the others and having, blood being shed in the nation because of that, or resigning. And that's exactly what President João Goulart decided to do. He accepted the defeat. He exiled in Montevideo, Uruguay, and after that, the military assumed power in Brazil, and they remained in power for 21 years until the redemocratization of Brazil. That's a difficult word. But anyway, this is a topic for our next video. I hope you have enjoyed this video now that covered the João Goulart government. And see you in our next video.